It was a foggy evening when Jenna, Max and Dylan set out on what seemed like an innocent adventure. The old hollow graveyard was just outside of town, a place the locals avoided, mainly because of the stories they heard growing up. The graveyard had been abandoned for generations, its weathered headstones overrun with ivy, the once meticulously maintained grounds now wild and unruly. But the rumours had always intrigued Jenna and her friends. They'd heard whispers about it being haunted by the souls of the restless dead, that they roamed the cemetery at night, searching for lost souls to claim. One story in particular was always shared around the campfire. The tale of the Black Shadow, a dark figure that appeared after midnight and dragged people into the graveyard's depths, never to be seen again. Max was the first to suggest going there. "I'm sick of hearing about how haunted this place is," he said. "Let's see if we can't debunk this myth for once." Jenna was hesitant. "I don't know, Max, there's something off about that place. Everyone says it's bad luck." "Nonsense," he replied, grinning. "It's just a bunch of old headstones and weeds. What's the worst that could happen?" So they ventured out under the dimming sky, their flashlights cutting through the growing fog. The graveyard was far more unsettling than they had imagined. The once beautiful gates were rusted, hanging loosely on their hinges, creaking in the wind like a warning. The mist that clung to the ground seemed unnaturally thick, swallowing their footsteps and muffling the world around them. "Let's make this quick," Dylan said, his voice tight. "We'll snap a few pictures and then head out. No need to get crazy." They walked deeper into the cemetery, passing rows upon rows of tilted gravestones, some broken, some so weathered the names were unreadable. The moon had just risen, casting long shadows across the ground. It felt like the graveyard was holding its breath, the stillness so profound it almost made them uncomfortable. Then, as they moved further in, something strange happened. The temperature dropped suddenly. Jenna shivered. "Did you feel that?" she asked, but neither of the boys had noticed. Max was already snapping photos, his camera clicking rapidly. "It's just the fog. No big deal." They continued walking, but Jenna couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was more than just the shadows, which seemed to stretch and warp unnaturally. It was something far darker. The air felt heavy, thick with an oppressive force that pressed against her chest. Then it happened. A distant thump echoed through the cemetery, followed by another and then a third, louder this time. It was a sound they couldn't identify. "What the hell is that?" Max said, his tone now less confident. Jenna felt her heartbeat quicken. "I don't know, we should leave." But before they could move, the air seemed to shift. The fog swirled, coiling around them like living tendrils, and a strange sound began to rise from the ground beneath their feet, a low, guttural growl, almost as though something was coming alive from the earth itself. Dylan turned pale. "What's that?" he whispered, pointing towards the old mausoleum at the centre of the graveyard. From the shadows, they saw it, the figure. At first it was just a silhouette in the fog, but then it emerged, taking shape. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form shifting in the mist. Its face was covered by a cloak of darkness, and it moved as though it was gliding across the ground rather than walking. Max's voice trembled. "It's just a trick of the light, that's all." But the growling grew louder, and now they could hear scraping noises like something dragging across the ground. Jenna screamed. The figure was getting closer, and now they could hear footsteps, heavy, dragging steps. Before they could react, the air around them went deathly still. The whispers came then, soft, chilling murmurs, barely audible but unmistakable. "Leave now." Max was the first to break into a run. "We need to go, now!" They bolted, but the fog closed in, thicker than before. and the shadows grew longer, reaching for them like fingers. The scraping sound followed them, relentless, and the growls seemed to come from all directions, too many to pinpoint. As they neared the gate, Jenna felt something grab her ankle. Cold, clammy fingers that tugged at her, pulling her toward the ground. She screamed and kicked, but it wouldn't let go. Max and Dylan turned back, desperately reaching for her, but the moment they did, they saw it, the black shadow. It was no longer in the distance. It was right there, standing between them and the gate, blocking their only escape. Jenna's scream echoed in the fog as she was dragged into the mist. The last thing they heard was the sound of her bones cracking, her voice cut off as though swallowed by the very earth. Dylan and Max didn't stop running. They didn't look back, even when the growling turned to howls, screams of something that was chasing them. They finally stumbled out of the graveyard, breathless and covered in sweat. The fog was gone. The growls and whispers faded into the night. The graveyard was silent once again, its gates closed tight. The next day, the graveyard was just as they had left it, silent, abandoned, and undisturbed. But Max and Dylan knew better. They knew what they had seen, and they would never speak of it again. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost, confused, and feeling like you were being watched? Beware, there are terrifying and mysterious beings that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles, if you dare.